The capital cities of virtually every Western European country are paralyzed today, viewer, because farmers in all of these countries have gotten into their tractors and in their hundreds gone to the center of town. The main images coming in today are from Paris, from Rome, and from Brussels, the capital of the European Union, where the European Union Parliament is, where the European Union Summit will be taking place tomorrow. Very, very dramatic images. Thousands of tractors are on the streets, at least 1,000 tractors, according to a local estimate in Brussels, are on the streets. They've gherowed the entire EU Parliament a day before the EU Summit because angry farmers have decided to lodge and register their protest over the huge pressures of compliance owing to regulations on climate change, the price of their produce nosediving, not being able to get the correct price for what they've been growing, food inflation pressures, and other government regulations that they say are inimical to farmer welfare. So farmers have all united in all of these European capitals. The big image, of course, today, including fire, arson, vandalism, stone pelting, and 1,000 tractors in the road are coming in from Brussels just one day before the big EU summit that will be held at the EU Parliament, which is situated in Brussels. Now, when we mention farmer protests, you, of course, remember the farmer protests that took place here in India just a few years ago. Farmers versus the European Union has intensified. In Brussels, the farmers have lit fires outside the European Parliament building as a part of the ongoing protests over excessive costs, rules, and bureaucracy. But few have forgotten the protests that took place in India over progressive reforms that were being imposed on farmers. Finally, the government had to embarrassingly roll back the first progressive agricultural reforms in decades. But let's focus today not on India, but on Europe. The European Union, viewer, had lectured India. Many of these countries had given India condescending gyan a few years ago when the Punjab farmers had collected around the Ghazipur border and the Singhu border near Delhi to put pressure on the government. They had lectured India about farmer welfare. And today, that very same crisis is at their doors, except that it is not progressive policy, it is not progressive rules and regulations, but a whole gamut of other decisions being taken by the European Union that have come now to bite them back. The farmers are blocking traffic across Belgium, France and Italy this Wednesday as they sought to, Wednesday and Thursday, as they're seeking to disrupt trade at major ports and other economic lifelines. Not just that, they were seen spraying milk on buildings or filling streets with cattle. 1,000 tractors are on the roads. Dutch farmers from the Netherlands are dumping manure on the streets and protesting outside politicians' houses. They've gotten into their tractors. They're lining up on highways and making it between state borders to register their protest in the most high-profile capitals. The agitation saw its beginnings last year in France when farmers started blocking roads across the country. France is Europe's largest agrarian producer. The farmers have been demanding government action to address numerous grievances, including not being paid enough, being choked by excessive regulation on environmental protection, and a huge litany of bureaucratic red tape that has stopped farmers from being able to expand and better their livelihoods. So let's just explain and clarify once again, because these visuals, viewer, I know are extremely compelling, and I want to continue to show you the most compelling pictures, the moving pictures of those tractors. I'm going to ask our producer to play the most dramatic images only so we can depict what really is happening outside the European Parliament, including the fire, the stone pelting, and those images of the tractors moving down the highway in large numbers. I want our viewers to see only those most compelling visuals, not the other static images. Now, why are European farmers protesting? Let me just summarize for you what the deal here is. Farmers claim in Europe that they aren't being paid enough, which is an amazing irony, given how the European Union and many of these countries had condescendingly lectured India about farmer welfare just a couple of years ago during the protests here. The farmers in Europe claim they're being choked by excessive environment regulations, competition from cheaper exports from other countries, high costs for energy, fertilizer and transport, the plan to phase out tax breaks on diesel and fuel. All of these have resulted in historic anger among European farmers, and that's the reason why they've united in their tractors, in their thousands, and decided to put a chokehold on Europe's biggest lifelines. They completely surrounded the European Parliament as well, which we'll be showing you in just a moment. Now, Europe's farmer uprising is happening in the following countries, viewer. We've shown you what's happening in Belgium, but it actually started in France, which is Europe's biggest agrarian producer by far. France, Germany, Belgium, Netherlands, Spain, Portugal, Romania, and Hungary. So largely confined to Western and Central Europe, but also a couple of countries in Eastern Europe, including Romania and Hungary, are also involved in this farmer action. So it's a united uprising by farmers looking to influence policy and put pressure on policymakers in order to roll back some of those rules and regulations. They say they are being choked. I want to bring in India Today's Nabila Jamal for more on this story. Nabila, very dramatic images that one doesn't usually see in European capitals. These are countries where law and order and discipline, especially in VIP areas, is a non-negotiable thing. But especially in Brussels tonight, but also Paris, thousands of tractors, pretty much paralyzing these very important areas to put pressure. Explain to us what's going on right now.
Unbelievable visuals coming in from European Union, Shiv. We see farmers there have literally brought the EU to its knees because the kind of protest that they've launched, and this is not in the last 24 hours, this has been on for the last 1 year. And at least in the last few weeks, we know that the farmers have escalated their protests. As we see, they've been spraying manure at buildings. They've literally geared out the parliament in EU. They've managed to actually break tarred roads, literally break away tarred roads through their tractors. Enough and more dirt that's being sprayed on reputed buildings across several areas of France, Italy, Germany. The protests have moved on to different countries of EU. And we also know the protests actually took on a different turn when a mother and daughter walked into the famed Louvre Museum in Paris and actually poured soup on the Mona Lisa's painting. Thankfully, it had a glass covering on it. But that's what happened, and that's where this entire news has grabbed headlines. The farmers, of course, are protesting against the low prices, the low wages that they get. And also, surprisingly, we see that a lot of the imports, be it tomatoes, cauliflower, cabbage, etc., that's coming in from different countries into countries like France and Italy, etc., are being thrown on the streets by the same farmers. So they're asking for better prices for imports and exports. And it appears that the EU has finally heard. Today, we believe there's a massive summit in EU, and right there is the protest that's happening. And they've already decided, especially France has decided, that they're going to come up with some measures to ensure the farmers are paid better, and export and imports, the prices that go to farmers particularly, are reworked. So there is a word on concession for these farmers, but how soon will that happen? That remains to be seen. But this has really hampered business in many of the EU countries, as you listed out.
Okay, stay with me, Nabila. I also want to get a perspective from France. We are joined now from Paris by Nicholas Barr. He's a senior journalist in France, and he's also watching this story unfold. Nicholas, thank you for your time and for being with us here on India Today. We've been looking at this story closely, these dramatic images of, hundreds of tractors, perhaps even thousands of tractors, on the road in Brussels and other cities, including possibly Paris. We do know that this farmer agitation began in France last year. It has carried on and escalated quite a bit ahead of the EU summit. How are you looking at this unfold, Nicholas?
Well, at this precise moment, the French Prime Minister is starting a press conference where he is expected to announce some measures in favor of those farmers. What is interesting is, as your reporters have said, is that this movement of protest is all over Europe. You had big protests in Germany, in Spain, and now in France, and they have many things in common. They protest a lot about what they think is an excess of norms, of regulations, in particular on environment, and but also there's another dimension, which is that they consider that they are unable to sell their product at a fair price to the industry, and it's particularly strong in this country, in France, where the farmers have been, the milk producers or meat or whatever, they're all saying that it's very difficult. They're not in a good position to negotiate with big industry and to sell their products at a fair price.
Yes.
And yeah, sorry.
Nicholas, do you think that the measures that are likely to be announced by the French leadership could defuse this situation?
Yes, it's possible, because just a few minutes ago, the head of the largest farmers' union has said that they were confident that they had assurance from the government that they would have good measures, and so that they have been heard. So we have the feeling that the government is giving up something, is in particular on regulation. They're ready to move forwards,
yes.
And so there are many signs that the crisis could ease, at least. But at the same time, you have some farmers, which are probably a minority, but are very, very determined to continue.
Yes.
And so that's always difficult in that kind of movement. You have the bigger union who says, well, let's be reasonable. The government is taking good measures, and then you have other smaller organizations that are pushing for more money, more measures in favor of agriculture. I have to add that
yes.
that kind of movement is very popular. People like the farmers, and so there's a lot of sympathy in public opinion. Farming, it's only 1.5% of the workforce in France.
Yes.
So it's very small in numbers, but it's very popular, and people like the countryside, like farmers, and etc. So. Sorry.
Is it also very political, Nicholas? Have opposition parties and opposition politicians also tried to get in on this and, make use of this whole agitation for political ends?
Yeah, of course, you're perfectly right, because, in a few months, in June, we'll have the European elections.
Indeed,
for the
yes.
European Parliament. And so, of course, it's the beginning of the campaign. And so all the opposition parties all over Europe, especially far right, are pushing, and they are using this movement for to gain votes. So it's very difficult for all governments in Germany, in the Netherlands, in France as well, to because of this electoral contest. We are in the middle of this. As you are in India, we're
yes.
in the middle of a political campaign, and yes.
Absolutely. Because there will be some who will draw parallels, Nicholas, between the farmer protests that took place in India a couple of years ago and these protests.
Yes.
Similarly, there was a lot of public sympathy for the farmers here. The government
yes.
actually had to roll back the laws that they had announced. Even though those laws were seen by many experts as being progressive and required for taking agriculture to the next level of modernization, etc., they had to roll it back because it had become such a political issue. Is there a danger of that happening there as well in Europe?
Exactly, it's exactly the same pattern. People are. There's a paradox. People want more measures in favor of environment,
yes,
to fight, global warming, etc., and so more regulation on that. And then at the same time, well, the farmers are saying, well, too much a burden on us, and the same people who want that kind of regulation, stronger regulation on climate, they sympathize for the farmers,
Yeah.
and say, well, the governments and Brussels and Europe imposes too much regulations that are too strict, and it's true that the agricultural sector is subject to a lot of regulation. For example, if you can have tens of regulations for the same thing, and because you have the European level, you have the national level, regional level, etc. So it's kind of a nightmare for many farmers. And on top of that, of course, since the war in Ukraine, the energy costs have gone up.
Yes,
and it's also one of the reasons of the anger that we see today. It's these people have suffered from huge energy costs, and also because Europe wants to help Ukraine, we have opened up the European market to Ukrainian products like chicken, like wheat, like everything. So that we import Ukrainian products free of tax.
yes.
And that's also something that make farmers angry, because they say that it's an unfair competition. Of course, we want to help Ukraine, but we not. But we don't want to have to pay for that. As a farmer, we don't want to pay for that.
Nicholas, last couple of questions. Since this entire agitation actually began last year in France, and now these protests have spread to all of the big capitals in Europe. Have all of these governments, including the French government, misjudged how big this was going to become? Did they miss that this was going to become a much, much bigger thing?
Yes, I think so, and they misjudge also the fact that these farmers' organizations all over Europe are talking together.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
2 days ago, I spoke to the head of one of the big unions here in France, and he was telling me that he had just a phone call with his Italian counterpart, and he was in contact with the Germans and everything. So probably the governments have misjudged this, the fact that all these farmers' organizations were able to speak together and that they had the same concerns.
So a press conference is going to be starting any moment now. We hope that things can be resolved very soon. The EU summit is about to start. So obviously the protests happening in Brussels right now, and the very dramatic pictures of fires being set and stones being thrown, etc. Nicholas, I'm sure you've seen those images as well. So one final comment from you. Obviously the farmers have been able to consolidate and unite in such a way as to bring the maximum amount of pressure on European politicians, and that's what we're seeing right now.
Yes, exactly. The paradox of the movement is that 1/3 of the EU budget is for agriculture. I mean, without these subsidies,
yes,
the French agriculture would be in a very, very difficult situation, much worse than today, and we could say the same for Italy, for Spain, for other European countries. So it's the farmers in Europe get a lot of subsidies from the taxpayers.
Yes.
But so that's why they are in Brussels now. They say, well, okay, you help us, but we want more, and also we want to renegotiate or some of the trade agreements that we have with other countries.
Absolutely.
They're very worried with a trade agreement that is being negotiated now, and the French president is against that treaty with Latin America, with Mercosur. And
True.
it's so that's one thing. But there are other trade agreements
Yes.
with New Zealand, with Chile, with etc. that are that the farmers want to abolish in a way.
Okay. We'll leave it there for the moment. Very much appreciate your time and your inputs on this story, Nicholas. Stay safe, and thank you very much for bringing us that big story on India today.